Sometimes a single day can tell you everything you need to know about the state of a nation and even its place in the world. Well, January 17th, 2026 was one of those days. A whole series of confrontations just erupted, shaking up international alliances and exposing some really deep fractures right here at home.
So, where did this day of confrontation kick off? Well, it wasn't with bullets, but with words. Thousands of Greenlanders hitting the streets, chanting a message that was loud, clear, and aimed directly at the White House. It was their answer to a demand that was, frankly, as audacious as it was unprecedented.
And this wasn't just some polite request to buy Greenland. Oh no. The administration actually threatened a full-blown trade war against 8 of its closest allies if they didn't help broker a deal. This was a public ultimatum, pure and simple, and it sent immediate shockwaves across the Atlantic.
All right, so let's get into the specifics of this Greenland gambit. What exactly was the threat? Well, the details were laid out with this kind of chilling clarity. It was a high-stakes play, and it was designed to force Europe's hand.
The ultimatum was just brutally direct. It started with a 10% tariff on all goods, which would then escalate to a really punishing 25% by the summer. And the only way out? The complete and total purchase of Greenland. There was zero ambiguity here, just raw economic muscle tied directly to buying a country.
And you got to understand, this wasn't some surgical strike. It was a massive broadside against the very heart of the Western Alliance. I mean, Denmark was the main target, sure, but the ultimatum also took aim at 7 other key European nations. We're talking about decades of partnership just being put on the line.
So, how did Europe react? Well, their response was swift, it was unified, and they did not hold back. Instead of dividing them, the American threat actually seemed to forge an even stronger wall of opposition.
French President Emmanuel Macron was one of the first to fire back, calling the threats unacceptable. And what he did was really strategic. He framed this not just as a fight over Greenland, but as a total rejection of what he called intimidation tactics anywhere on the world stage.
And right on his heels was the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who called the threat completely wrong. His statement hammered home the core principle here for the European side, self-determination. He argued Greenland's future belongs to its own people, period. It's not for sale to the highest bidder.
Okay, so while this huge diplomatic firestorm is raging across the ocean, multiple crises were brewing right here at home. And they were touching on everything from the economy to civil rights. First up, something that hits everybody, the cost of living. An analysis from The Guardian showed a pretty stark reality. Instead of going down, energy bills were surging. Electricity was up 6.7%, and gas was up 5.2% in just the last year. That's a heavy burden on family budgets. And this isn't just a number on a chart. This was the comprehensive failure of a massive campaign promise to cut energy bills in half. For a lot of voters, this was a direct hit to their wallet and a really powerful symbol of a promise that just wasn't kept. At the same time, you have these tensions between protesters and federal authorities just reaching a boiling point. The use of so-called less lethal munitions came under a microscope after an anti-ICE protest in California. 2 people were reportedly blinded, which is just this tragic reminder that less lethal can still have absolutely devastating, life-altering consequences. So you can see how all this anger is starting to build, right? And it's fueling this new wave of activism. In response, organizers are now calling for a massive nationwide protest on January 20th, which happens to be the anniversary of the inauguration. The plan is for walkouts from schools and workplaces to send a very clear message.
But it wasn't just about the big headlines, the ultimatums, and protests. Other fault lines were emerging in the nation's cultural fabric, in federal health policy, on the steps of the Supreme Court, and even inside official financial disclosures.
So check this out. In a move that really alarmed a lot of health and environmental experts, the Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., unveiled new dietary guidelines that basically flipped the old food pyramid on its head. They officially placed animal-based proteins like red meat and cheese above plant-based options.
Meanwhile, as the Supreme Court was hearing this pivotal case on transgender rights, a pretty disturbing shift was happening outside. Advocates on the ground reported that the crowds opposing trans rights were visibly larger, louder, and way more aggressive than in past rallies. It was a chilling sign of a really polarized and intensifying culture war.
And then there's this number. A new financial disclosure revealed that the president recently bought over $1 million worth of bonds in Netflix and Warner Bros. Discovery. Now, the timing here raised some serious questions, because the purchase came just days after he publicly said he would be involved in a potential merger between the two companies.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. You've got a trade ultimatum, domestic unrest, cultural clashes, and these big financial questions, all converging on a single day in January. Each one is a story of conflict, and together they reveal a nation under pressure from all sides.
So, to recap the day, on the world stage, this major diplomatic standoff with Europe. At home, growing unrest fueled by broken economic promises and harsh protest crackdowns. Culturally, you have these intense flashpoints playing out in federal policy and on the steps of the Supreme Court. And at the highest level, you have financial scrutiny raising questions about potential conflicts of interest.
You know, any one of these stories would be a big deal on its own, but when you weave them all together on a single day, they paint a portrait of a nation and a world under immense strain. And it leaves us with a really critical question. When this many fractures are exposed all at once, the challenge isn't just about what comes next, but whether those fractures can ever be repaired.